Here we go. All right, thank you for joining us here this evening. This is our second session on mental health awareness, and tonight we're focusing on how mental health impacts school. And so I just want to welcome everyone who's joining in person and also joining virtually. And then I know some people will be watching this video later, and I just appreciate everyone that's participating because it is a very important topic, and it's just good that we're all gathered here to learn more about it. So I'm going to go through a couple slides of information. They won't be projected, but just going through kind of to set up tonight, and then I'll introduce our panel for this evening. The overall goal for this session is to learn more about mental health and how to support others who may be struggling with what we call mental health challenges or a mental health condition. It's important for us to normalize these conversations. I hear a lot about stigma surrounding mental health, or conversations talking about it. A lot of people maybe don't want to share that they're struggling or seek help because they feel they're going to be judged for that, or that something's wrong with them. And that's why these conversations can be pretty powerful and effective as well. And it can also, like talking about, can help improve our communities. Not only, like tonight we're focusing on school, but our school communities, but also our community at large. And again, just helping people to know the resources that is available or are available, and then how to get that help. And the first step is just knowing that it's okay for them to take that step. And I just want to say, like, tonight is really all about learning, creating a learning environment here. There's a lot of wisdom and experience in the room, not only from our panel, but from our audience as well. So we just want to keep that in mind as we learn from each other. And then to be non-judgmental, not that you would be, but just to know there are going to be some personal stories that will be shared tonight. So just as you're listening to those, or maybe you had a different experience in school or with your son or daughter, based on what we share tonight, and you'll be like, well, that didn't really happen for me. And so just keep that in mind too. Like something I've become more aware of the last couple weeks is when we know better, we do better. And that's part of our goal here as well. So tonight, we're going to briefly define mental health and discuss the importance of the topic. So we've been doing that. We're going to hear from the Eichmann family, part of the Eichmann family in their journey through their mental health challenge, and looking at their past with it, and then where they are presently. We're going to hear from a professional therapist, Amber, right next to me, who works with students in the schools. We're going to hear from a high school teacher, Jackie, about her experience in working with students and supporting them in the classroom, but then also her role as an advocate, but also an advisor for the Youth Impact Club at the high school. And we're going to talk about different resources that will be available as well. At the end of this session tonight, the video will be posted, and there also will be resources that will be posted as well. Some people submitted questions, and those questions and answers will be posted there too. Maybe not tomorrow, but within the next couple days. So we're going to go through questions tonight, like near the end. If any of you have questions, you can just let us know, and we'll do our best to answer those tonight. So just a definition of mental health, this is from where we're at today. It encompasses all of our emotional, psychological, and social well-being. It affects how we think, feel, and act, and it influences how we handle stress, how we make decisions, and how we interact with others, so all of our relationships. And because it encompasses so much of who we are and how we are with others, that's why it can be a very important thing, especially if there's anything that's compromising our mental health. It will affect our daily activities. It allows us to cope with challenges that come up and form meaningful relationships, and also set and reach our goals. And then I'll experience a feeling of well-being or just fulfillment that all of us seek for in our lives. And mental health can present itself on a continuum where on one end people are healthy and they don't have any distress at that time, and they're functioning in a pretty normal capacity. And then you have the other end, which would be like more significant, more severe, what they would label as mental illness, where your impairment, your ability to function, do day-to-day tasks will be deeply impaired. And then you have like people that fall in anywhere in between there. And all of us have mental health or experience mental health. All of us have bad days. Sometimes it may get to the point where it reaches that other end of the spectrum where we're just not able to handle it on our own, or handle it on our own really well. Some statistics. So from the National Alliance of Mental Illness, the reason why this is so important to talk about, 1 in 5 U.S. adults experience mental illness each year. 1 in 20 adults experience a serious mental illness, so on that far end of the spectrum where they're deeply impaired. As far as schools go, 1 in 6 in the U.S., youth age 6 to 7 experience a mental health disorder each year. 50% of all lifetime mental illness begins by the age of 14, and 75% will begin by the age of 24. So, looking at those school age years as being very important to identify mental health conditions early on and to get support early on as well. And also with the school age youth, suicide is the second leading cause of death among people aged 10 to 14. And I read recently that over 60% of the teenagers who are experiencing depression are not receiving treatment or seeking treatment. So a large portion of our population, and that, I don't know what the statistic is for adults, but it probably could mirror that as well. So a lot of people are experiencing a mental health challenge, but then not getting the support that they could benefit from. All right. So now we're going to introduce the panel. So I mentioned a little bit real briefly. So on the end is Karen Eichman. She works in the district and has for many years, but she's here in her capacity as a parent, as a mother, and the mother of Lydia, who is a senior. And I met them back when I was a counselor at Badger Middle School, when Lydia was in 7th grade. And so we'll hear their story. I really appreciate you guys being here. I shared a little bit earlier just that personal impact of your story that can have, and that connection, and to know that it can happen to anybody, and then just talking about and hearing from your journey, that will be able to help a lot of people who are listening to this as well this evening. And then right next to me is Amber Brown. So she's a licensed clinical therapist at affiliated clinical services here in town. And we have a lot of agencies that come into the schools from the community, and Amber just represents one of those who works in our schools, and she works in the community as also seeing students and adults and families too. And then Jackie Schmolt. Jackie is a social studies teacher at the high school, and so she's here in that capacity as a teacher, but also filling multiple roles this evening. She had a son who committed suicide, so just being an advocate for mental health and suicide prevention, that led her to be involved and start the Youth Impact Club at the high school, which focuses on suicide prevention. And then just so later on we'll hear from your story there, but then also how you're supporting students in the classroom, and then also through the Youth Impact Club. So welcome. We're going to kick things off with Karen, and what I want to ask you, Karen, is just if you can start off with maybe where you guys are at right now, and then maybe work backwards from there. But again, like your journey, sharing as much of that as you want to, and then also more directly, like how that impacted school for you as a parent, but then seeing your daughter, struggle with maybe different things in school or outside of school. And I will admit, I was Lydia's counselor at the time, and so I probably wasn't as good of a counselor as I would be now, just knowing more and having more support, because I know a lot of that journey you had to figure out on your own. So just to be able to talk through that as well. So Karen, I'll just turn it over to you.
All right, thank you. Thank you for asking us to be a part of this. Where we're at now with Lydia, she is a senior. We are still struggling every day with the mental health portion. Getting her to school is a challenge. Her migraines, things that make it difficult for her to come to school. That is something that we deal with on the daily with her, and she knows that. And we are, as a family, working with our doctors on the medication for the migraines in order to get her where she needs to be. As Sean had said, 7th grade was a very tough year for Lydia. Her mental health, I guess as I would say, we saw she just kind of went into this really dark place. The changes I saw were a huge amount of weight loss. She shut the world out, including me, which is something, as her mother, we had a very great relationship. We still do now, but she became very distant from me. She hated it when I would go anywhere. I could not go to the store. She'd have to know when I was going to be back, who I was going with, how long I was going to be gone. She'd call my cell phone the minute I left the house. Things got progressively worse with her. We do a presentation on this, and it takes me 2 hours, so I'm trying to just give you the quick overview on what we did. The first thing we did is we called our doctor and said, something's not right. She's just not the Lydia that we know. They suggested medications, and I was like, absolutely not. We're not going to put her on anything. We'll try and figure it out. Needless to say, she needed the medication. We did see an upswing with her. However, it was not where we needed her to be. After a couple different medications, my pediatrician said, I think your daughter needs treatment. And I was like, okay, treatment. Nope, I'm good. I'm been in education. I can fix this. I could not. So her dad and I made the decision to put her into Rogers IOP, which is intensive outpatients, for 12 weeks. That started her 7th grade, in 7th grade when she was at Badger. That was from 2 to 7, Monday through Friday. And they worked with her to overcome some of her anxiety, not all of it. As I said, this is something that we still deal with. She went in very angry, hated me. I was the worst person in the world, and came out and said thank you, because they had given her the tools to fix her anxiety. It's like she had said to me during one of our presentations, Mom, it's like I have a puzzle, and I know where all the pieces are supposed to go. I just can't get them to fit. So she had all these tools. She had everything that she needed to get through it. She didn't know how. She was not able to say, this is what I need for this is how I'm feeling for this. So with Rogers and the therapy that we see outside of Rogers, she has come a very, very long way. Things that she would do, we kind of chuckle at it now, but at the time, she would take her temp between 7 and 10 times before school, hoping to have a fever to stay home, faking a migraine to stay home, faking that she was going to throw up because she didn't want to go to school. Not that she didn't want to, she couldn't. She was not in the place. Her anxiety, her depression were so bad, she could not get to school. Thankfully, we've had a work in progress. She's got a ways to go yet. But having the support and being able to talk about it, right? Like for me, I didn't want people to know at first, right? Like I'm in education, I'm fine, we'll figure it out. But letting that wall down, we're not the only ones going through this. And I think opening that door, opening that communication of it's okay. It's okay not to be okay. And I tell that to my students, I tell that to Lydia, it's okay not to be okay. But how can we get you to where you need to be? So where we are now is, as my senior, she goes to school when she can. She's got amazing teachers, Jackie, who work with her. And keeping that line of communication open with the teachers, with the counselors, has really, I think, opened a lot of people's eyes to what mental health looks like. Right? If my daughter had cancer or anything, I'd get her treated for that. I'm treating her for this. So I think talking about it, asking questions, you're only going to better yourself and your child.
Thank you, Karen. And I just realized I didn't introduce myself earlier. It was a little hectic here getting things started, but I'm Sean Becker. I was a counselor at Badger Middle School for many years, and now am in the role of the mental health navigator for the school district, which really is a fancy way of saying helping families get the counseling support that they need, those services, and trying to work through some of the barriers that might exist to speed up that process for families to get connected. And so, Karen, I thank you for that. And I did step out for a little while to grab a pen, and I don't think you covered this. Can you talk a little bit about maybe as you look back, were there warning signs or what we call warning signs, like things that you noticed, like, maybe after things got really challenging for Lydia, looking back, like, well, here's something I noticed, like, oh, well, that was a sign maybe I should have paid a little more attention to, or, there were several things now I can name, but at the time I didn't really see them.
When she was younger, kindergarten, it was having to get on the bus. It was having to be separated from me. It was looking at her and how she was interacting with her peers at school. She was very quiet. She was very withdrawn. At the time, I just thought, well, she's just young. She doesn't know. As she got older, it was the same thing. She was withdrawn. She wanted to be with us. She didn't want to go and have sleepovers, ever. Kids could come over to our house, but she would not go anywhere. So looking back, the things that I thought was just quote-unquote normal behavior was probably a red flag that I just didn't see because I didn't know. I didn't know what to look for. So those were definitely, looking back, some things that I saw. She'd come home from school and immediately take a nap, like 3-4 hours, because she was exhausted from holding everything together. I just thought she's just tired, right? She's got a lot of homework, she just needs to lay down. Looking back, those were all signs for me that she had anxiety, she had depression, there was something more going on. I just didn't see it.
All right, thank you for that. Lydia, so thank you for being here. And, I noted that you're the courageous daughter here, and I really appreciate your courage to be here to talk about this. And I know you've done it before, but just to be able to share more of your story. And I guess maybe the question I'd like to start with you is how? How do you manage? Your mom talked about a little bit of your experience and your growth in where it started to get more challenging in middle school, but now what is it like for you? And I guess I would like to know how maybe the difference between a good day when you wake up and you're like, oh, I'm going to school, versus a day where you just can't do it.
So basically, good days are where I wake up and I'm okay. I feel okay. There's a difference between I wake up and I just have a headache and I just don't feel good. And there's a difference between where I wake up and I have anxiety and it's I can't do this. So good days, I wake up, I don't have a stomach ache, I don't have a headache, my heart is not racing, I'm completely calm, I'm good. But then there's other days where I wake up, it could be at midnight and I wake up and I'm I know right away I'm not going to school that day because of my racing thoughts and my heart beating so fast, and I just get all super anxious about it. Then there's days where I wake up, have a migraine. Those are different than my anxiety. But on top of that, my anxiety plays a trick in my migraines because I get anxious that I have a migraine, that I'm missing so much school. So then it's kind of like a circle. Everything just connects.
So you get caught in a cycle where it's hard to break out of that then too. And like you said, absolutely, a lot of times there's crossover or carryover with a physical symptom like your migraine or your headache, or even feeling tired or having a stomach ache, and then the real anxiety where there's no way you can push through it. Can you talk about what it was like in middle school? Did you, or when you first maybe noticed a difference meaning where it was harder for you to get to school or to go through with things or maybe be in social situations?
So in middle school, this all kind of started in 5th grade when we had that big change from elementary to intermediate. It's I kind of figured that out there, that I don't like change. I still don't, probably never will, but I work through it. In middle school, I kind of realized that, not that I was different, but I was not as normal as everyone would say. I'm a quiet person when it comes to just social stuff. So I like to keep to myself. In middle school, I kind of realized that I was really withdrawing from everybody. I used to play softball. So with my softball team, I used to very withdrawal. I didn't talk to anybody. I'd go to practice, but then there was days I hated going to practice. And I just wanted not to talk to people. And that was my big thing. If I know people, I'm very talkative. It's with my friends, I realized that I didn't want to be around them or talk to them. So that was kind of a big red flag for me. And then there was in the car on the way to school, I realized that I didn't want to be there. I don't know why, I just didn't want to be there. And I got super anxious. It's it was on close to having a panic attack every morning, and I didn't know why. It was having a stomach ache, feeling you're gonna throw up, but don't know why. everything was like, you didn't have an answer to it. And that was a big thing for me, is like, I wanted to be able to like know what to do when I got in this funk, and I didn't have anything. I really just retreated. I didn't talk to anyone. I didn't talk to my family. My room was my safe space, still is. That's just where I go. I curl up in my bed and don't talk to anyone. I'll sit on my phone and do nothing. But I didn't talk to friends. I didn't do anything. I kind of just like retreated. I was by myself, but that was my own doing.
But that's what you knew at the time, or what was working for you, yeah. Can you talk about how, back again in middle school, how did your friends respond, and your teachers?
So, because I'm a quiet person, I didn't really have a ton of friends. I had like 1 or 2 close friends. So when I finally got around to like telling them what was going on, because at the time I didn't want to tell anybody what was going on. Like, I just didn't want to be different. I didn't want people to look at me differently. But when I told them, they understood to a point. But nobody can truly understand what's going on unless you've felt it in some way, that's what not many people understand. It's like, you can't truly connect with someone unless you like share something to go with that. But then there were some people who are just like, they think mental health isn't like a true thing, and like they just don't understand it. So like, there was that part of me where I didn't want to do anything. I didn't want to do these presentations because I didn't know what people would say. But then I got to a point where like, if I can help people. But the 2 close friends that I had, or still have, they helped a lot. Like, anytime they kind of saw me getting anxious, they'd pull me aside and just talk to me, and it was very nice to have a couple close friends.
And then the big question is school, right? So the impact on that. And can you talk about, whether it was middle school or high school, like what are some things that were in place that you maybe were like, oh, this really helped me? And then the opposite of that is, what is something, as you were experiencing more of that challenge and more of the difficulty even getting to school, what do you think may have helped you at the time that the school didn't do for you, or I didn't do for you at the time?
So with school, I have a 504, so that really helped. We kind of put into words what I all truly needed. Like for me, I don't like going up to a teacher and saying I need help. It's just not who I am. I don't like that. So in like my 504, it says like you can email your teacher or something like that. So that helped a lot, is not like having that pressure of where I needed to walk up to a teacher and be like, hey, I need help. There was also like just the teachers that didn't like, I don't want to say like pull me aside and talk about it, but they didn't look at me differently. They like knew I had like that I was struggling, but they didn't actively like point it out. Helping with work, because there was weeks where I wouldn't go to school because of my anxiety, and they'd help me with the work. They'd no count things that aren't like truly worth that much points or something like that. They would help with that. The times that teachers really didn't help, I don't know. I had really great teachers that understood, but like some of them didn't understand where like if I don't raise my hand, I don't want to be called on. That was a big thing that sent me into a panic attack right away. So they didn't really like pay attention to that aspect of it. I guess people who kind of like pulled me aside and like actively like tried to know what was going on, I guess. Like teachers who like were super nosy about it. They like, I know they mean well, but like they wanted to know every step of everything that was going on. That didn't help. That just added stress to me. Yeah.
So there had to be some balance there, but you said you had some really good teachers that you knew cared about you, and then they showed that by maybe pulling you aside at times when you needed it, but then also being respectful of knowing where your boundaries kind of were, like what you were comfortable with, what you weren't comfortable with. And I think that's a real challenge because that's student specific. And, for a teacher in a classroom, and Jackie, you can, just imagine this where you have 20 or 25 other students or 30, it's hard to always be able to give that kind of, or that level of care or concern. But like you said, that made a huge difference for you. And then talk about high school now. Like, what's that? Like, how do you feel you're doing right now? And there's a semester left. First semester's coming to an end. How do you feel about that? And then your plans afterwards, if you have any.
So high school right now, I mean, I enjoy it. I enjoy being around people because, like, then I can't actually, like, retreat into my safe space. But I like high school. Right now, it's kind of difficult with my migraines because it plays such a big role in, like, going to school. My attendance is very bad. My grades are kind of falling, but I know I have work that I can do. I just have to do it, which is, yeah, I have to do it. But high school, I mean, all my teachers that I've had are really great with it. They understand and they, like, accommodate the things that I need. I always give teachers credit for, like, I understand there's so many kids with 504, so I don't hold them, like, constantly to that. Like, you need to follow it step for step. I always very lenient. Like, it's okay if you mess up or whatever. So that's okay with me. Like, I'm not one of those people who are, like, very strict about it. So I always give my teachers credit for that. For the future, I want to be a neonatal nurse. So, like, I have plans to go to college, and I'm excited to do that. I'm excited for high school to be over and to go to college and just do what I want. But at the same time, it's scary because you don't know. Like, my depression could get bad again, or my migraines could not get fixed, and all this. So it's kind of like a circle. As I keep going back to a circle, it all adds on to things.
So if you had to look at a scale of like 1, I'm really not ready for the future yet, or I'm thinking my anxiety or depression could really interrupt that, or 10, I'm really confident. I have a lot of strategies now. Your mom talked about puzzle pieces, and you had a lot of those, but it sounds like you figured out some of those that do work for you. Like, how confident are you on being able to navigate the future as you move forward?
I would say I'm about like a 7 or an 8. Like, I'm confident, but at the same time, there's always that thought in the back of my head. I'm like, am I really gonna do this? Like, is my anxiety gonna let me? Like, there's that kind of stuff. But at the same time, I'm, like, super excited. Like, I have the motivation to do it. So when I have motivation, it's very easy to do something. So I think that plays a huge role in it. I'm, like, super motivated to go to college and just grow up, I guess.
Yeah. Well, you're doing that. Well, I think it's amazing. You said you were like at a 7 or an 8, because that's pretty high. But to have that confidence, and for me, it just shows that hope that you have, like you said, is tied to that motivation, and knowing that you're going to probably come along some stumbling blocks, but you're better prepared than you were. What would you say, like 4 years ago, you would have been at?
I probably would have been at like a 2, not anywhere near ready to, like, even explore college or anything like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So again, just that growth over time. And you talked about some of the reasons for that, and I think it's amazing that you're at that point right now. So Karen, I want to come back to you, like going back to school and some of those, like maybe the strategies or support that school provided that you felt was really helpful for Lydia at that time, like whether it was in middle school or as you progressed through high school.
I think the biggest thing is once she got the diagnosis of depression and anxiety, what do we do from here? I think keeping the communication open to teachers as far as where she's at, what she's doing, what the expectation is. I hold her accountable. She's not at school, she still has to do the work. It just may look a little different than the quote unquote, the student that's there every day. She's not there every day. So what her normal isn't the same. I think normalizing mental health, talking about it, like I said earlier. But I really think asking her and having her, she helped set up her 504. She told me, this is what I need to succeed. This is what would help me. So I think giving your child a voice in it and not making the decisions for them, because I could very easily have made all the decisions for Lydia and said, this is what we're doing, this is the next step. What good is that gonna do? That's benefiting me, not her. I think the schools are getting better at talking about it, acknowledging it, realizing it's a real thing. It's not just, oh, she's having a bad day. There's more to those bad days. I can say for me as an educator, it really helps me look at students differently. Behaviors, I look at them a little bit differently than I did prior to Lydia. Just making it normal, making it okay.
So you guys thrown out a term that not everyone is familiar with. So a 504 plan. Do you guys want to talk about what that is? I mean, I certainly can, but just want, not everyone or outside of education knows what a 504 plan is. So within the school setting, there are modifications or accommodations that students can receive. And with a 504 plan specifically, you have to have a medical diagnosis. So it could be a health concern, or it could be a mental health concern. And so once you have that diagnosis, the school then can work with the student or the family to provide accommodations. And so you guys mentioned the word accommodations, or you talked about things, I don't know if you use that term exactly, but a lot of times it could look like, you talked about being able to email your teacher because it's too hard or too difficult at that moment to go up and talk to them face to face. So that's kind of a simple one to put into a plan like that. Modifying assignments or the homework, so or breaking it down into smaller pieces. So if you're writing a paper, they're not going to say, well, the deadline is January 3rd and you have to just have it all done by then. Like they're going to say, okay, 3 weeks from now, we want you to have this much done, or 2 weeks from now, this much. And so just to kind of walk you through that a little bit. Doing checks, like for understanding, so to come around, like if you have an assignment or working on like maybe some math problems, the teacher will come by and just kind of check in with you and make sure it's like you're doing okay with that. So those are some of the more typical or common ones. Any others related specifically to your anxiety that, like Lydia, you said you were a part of creating that, your mom said. So like, what did you put in your plan that you felt would have been helpful for you, or what did you want in there?
I kind of put in there that like I wanted to have my own voice in telling my teachers that if I needed help. I put in there that I didn't like getting called on. I didn't like presentations. So they'd make accommodations where I could like just present to them, or write a paper or something different. Like group activities, I hated group activities. So like they'd find something else for me to do. Pretty much, yeah.
Some of the accommodations, she was able to pick her groups to make sure maybe she had a peer in there that she knew. When her first 504 was a page and a half long of accommodations, and now it is down to a page. So a lot of the accommodations she had in there, after she found the tools to work through her anxiety, we would take things out of there. She's like, I don't need that anymore. I don't need this one, I don't need this one. So for me as a parent, the goal was to get less and less accommodations for her, and she has done that.
So again, the 504 is a legal document. So once that's put in place, then Lydia, you mentioned earlier, like your teachers, they have to follow it and provide those opportunities for you, or those accommodations. In schools, we also offer like informal plans. So at least in the schools here in West Bend, where it may be a lot of those same things, but they don't have an official like 504 document. But they could have written into a plan where a student can take breaks. They may have modifications in their work. They may be able to, sometimes it's having what's called a soft start, so they might come into school, but they don't go to class right away. They may go into the counseling office or one of their trusted teachers or adults, and they check in with that person as a start, and then when they're ready, they go to class, or sometimes it might just be your first period. The opposite end of that would be like an early release, like maybe you have a partial day, you're not there for the full day. So different things built in that way as well. They can be flexible with the schedules, all right? So we might talk about the 504 a little bit more towards the end when we answer questions. But Jackie, I want to just hear from you and your experience. And I know you're Lydia's teacher, but you teach a lot of students and have for many, many years. And just looking at your experience with mental health, you have more awareness maybe than some of the other teachers in the building based on your personal experience, but then also just see like, how would you support a student that, whether you knew exactly that or what their exact mental health condition would be or challenge, how would you support them in the class?
All right, thanks. A lot of the things that Lydia talked about, we obviously have done, and I have to say one thing. Lydia did a really good job recently in advocating for herself with me, and I was so proud of her for saying, here's where I'm at, what do I need to do, and just like reaching out. So I love to see that kind of self-advocacy in students, because I know how much that means to be able to do that. And I also want to add that I also had a 504 when my son was diagnosed with ADHD. He had health issues as well, but that 504, it was a really valuable tool in guaranteeing that it was understood that he's got some major obstacles to overcome. So the fact that these students with disabilities can get themselves to school and can function given all the obstacles they're having to overcome that other kids don't have to face, I give them a lot of credit for that. And I just wanted to make sure I said something to that. I've given extended time because, you know, if you have a migraine, if you have anxiety, you have all these issues, I think extended time is a reasonable accommodation. It's very easy to do. I've done it for students that are officially under a plan, and like you said, Sean, unofficially, you know, you see a kid struggling, you just, you know, you talk to them, you find out what's going on and give them some extra time if they need it. And then I've also had a lot of students have it in their plans where they take a test or something that's a little bit more anxiety provoking in a different location where there aren't other people around, because they might worry about, well, what if I start to have a panic attack, or what if something's difficult, or if they're like my son was, he had some sensory issues, so noises were unbearable distractions. Anyone with an ADHD diagnosis might have that. So sometimes we do have rooms in our school where we can send students where they can have a little more privacy. Lydia mentioned the fact that she had teachers make accommodations for presenting in front of the class. It is terrifying for all of us to present in front of the class. And I encourage students to try it, but I understand that for some students that's a big leap. So I usually try to figure out where their comfort level is, and I've offered to a multitude of students, well, how about if you video record it at home and then we'll just play it? Well, it would cause them anxiety to watch themselves on TV. I'm like, I'll give you a pass out of the room. How about if you come in we have a flexible schedule where they can come in the morning at the high school, and they can present just to the teacher, and then that's not as hard. And you know, the more you force yourself as a person with anxiety to take those baby steps, the easier it gets, and then maybe eventually you'll be able to actually present like Lydia is today. So obviously she's come a long way. And then the other thing that I've done that Lydia also mentioned is not calling on a student that, especially if they're diagnosed with anxiety, unless they raise their hand. And in my class, I give students the option of passing anytime I call on them. I'm like, you know, if it's not your day, if you're having an off day, just say pass, and I'll do that. But some students have shared with me, and it's in their plan, not to call on them at all, or only when they raise their hand. And I make a note to myself, because I have a stack of cards with student names on that I shuffle through, so I call on everybody. But I come to certain students, says, do not call. Okay, they go to the bottom of the pile, and I don't call on them. So, you know, that's fine. You know, they look engaged, they're awake, they're paying attention. It's different for everyone. And yeah, I guess those are the things that I've done. Does that answer the question? I might have yammered on too long, sorry.
No, you're good, Jackie. And it does answer the question. And I think, you know, in just listening to you, there's the formal process of a 504 plan, but you don't need that to provide those strategies. And what you listed, there's a lot of things that teachers are doing informally in the classes to support students. So in my experience, I would say the last 3 or 4 years, like even pre-COVID, before COVID, we saw an increase in mental health concerns with students. And, you know, you've been in the classroom for a long time. Like, can you talk about that? Like, what have you noticed in young people over the last couple of years?
I agree. I have noticed an increase. And my therapist at Affiliated Clinical said that business is up 20%. So it's frightening to me. I worry about all of my students probably more than I should. I'm going to have anxiety actually, I do have anxiety as well. But there's a lot of kids that struggle, and I think I have a heightened awareness of it since my son died, and since I've become the advisor of the Youth Impact Club. I really watch these kids, and I hope that the parents are watching too, because there are red flags that we sometimes don't realize need to be investigated, like the high absentee rate that Lydia talked about, a sudden decline in grades. In fact, I've got a couple of students on my radar right now who started out strong at the beginning of the year, and all of a sudden they're crashing. I hope I'm not the only one seeing this. And quite often when I do notice that, I will send a note to the counselor and home, a little email just to like, hey, you know, I don't know what's going on, but just be aware that this is happening. So those things are important, but I think that it's huge. Sean had mentioned that the suicide rate for kids is the second leading cause of death. It's also the reason why clubs like the one I advise, I think, are really important. The Youth Impact Club is designed to teach kids and make them more aware of all these warning signs that we've been talking about. And just because you have anxiety doesn't mean you're suicidal, but it means that we need to look into it. And that's the first step in making sure you never get to that point of being suicidal. So this year especially, the students in the club are learning a strategy called QPR, which stands for Question, Persuade, and Refer. And it's a nationwide program that's pretty well known, and they are trained. I'm a certified instructor for that, so that's kind of convenient. And they get a certificate when they fulfill the requirement. They learn warning signs on how to look out for themselves and their friends and their family. And then they learn how to open up a dialogue and ask this person they care about really important questions leading up to, are you suicidal? Very hard question to ask, but you'd be surprised by the answers you get sometimes. And then what do you do from there? I don't want these students to think that they have to carry the burden of keeping their family members or friends alive by themselves. So this program really emphasizes that it's a team effort. We've got the 988 number for the suicide line on the back of their IDs. They can call that when they're not in school. They've got counselors at school. They're trained in who to talk to, where to go. So I just want to emphasize with them especially, you are not solely responsible for the well-being of your friend that you're worried about. That's a heavy, heavy load to carry. So I think that comes across, and I know that we've saved some lives by intervening. I feel really good about that. We haven't lost a student to suicide at West Bend since my son died in 2019, and I hope that that continues. We're going to work really hard to keep that trend going, but 90% of the suicides are related to a mental health issue. So dealing with that problem before, the earlier, the sooner, the more interventions, the better. And I think my students that are part of that club, really, it's so uplifting and hopeful to me to see that many that care, because we have over 60 members that show up at our meetings once a month, and so far 30 of them have received the certificate to have the official QPR training. So that is really good news, I think. And I also saw some updated statistics that in 2022, the teen suicide rates dropped by 8% nationwide. Even though it went up for the population overall, it dropped for that demographic. And I know that Hope Squads, like our Youth Impact Club is also a Hope Squad, they're spreading, and the awareness of all of these mental health issues is really reaching so much further. And I really feel like it's making a difference to talk about it, to raise awareness and all the resources that we have. We just gotta make sure that they know how to connect to those resources. So, that's it. I mean, there's more, but I'm done.
You're not done yet.
Uh,
Well, Jackie, and I appreciate that, and I want to thank you for starting that club and being such a huge advocate for within the West Bend schools for suicide prevention and just mental health overall. And as you mentioned, to not have a suicide for many years, that's a huge celebration. And I know a lot of that's your work due to you and that passion. And I met Zach and Beckham a couple weeks ago. So they're the president and vice president of the Youth Impact Club, two amazing young men. But just to see their passion as well, that you're spreading through that, just for not only taking care of themselves, like learning how to do that, but then also just having the eyes and ears for the rest of the students there, and being able to catch students early so they get that intervention and that support. So you mentioned resources, and I know in school you mentioned a couple of those, and we're going to talk about those a little bit, but I wanted to ask you if you're willing to talk about your other role, or another role you have in NAMI or through NAMI, and the support group that you offer there.
Yeah, our community has an organization called NAMI, the National Alliance for Mental Illness. They're in that building. It used to be an office building. It's across from the Moose Lodge. And it's a wonderful facility. Everything is free there. They have support groups for teens and adults struggling or not struggling with a mental illness, but diagnosed with a mental illness. Some people don't struggle, they manage it well. They have programs to help families who have a loved one. The program that I have helped create and I co-facilitate is an adult program. I know we're kind of focusing on teens, but it is an adult program that is for those who have survived a suicide loss. And we've been going strong for about, I think we're going on our third year. We meet the first and third Tuesday of every month at the NAMI office. The first year that we ran it, we only had a core group of 4 people, and everyone in that group was a mother who lost a son to suicide. But our group has expanded to include people who have lost a parent or a sibling or a spouse. So sadly, our group is growing, but not sad that they have found somewhere to get some comfort, because that is a tough road to travel. The one thing I would like to see change in the community, and I'm retiring at the end of the year, but not from my mental health role at NAMI or hopefully with the Youth Impact Club, is to get that same kind of support group for our teens. Because I know that I have 3 students who had a suicide loss within the last year. And I see them still struggling, and I don't have anywhere to send them. I can't send them to the NAMI program because it's adult only. So I really see that as a gap in our community that I would really like to fill for kids.
And we talked about this earlier in the week, and you said, like, and I appreciate that you're going to retire, but not retire from this. So be able to keep carrying that on. Yeah. All right. Thank you for that. Amber, so you've been waiting patiently, and I appreciate that. But I want to hear from you a little bit now. You have a unique role to be a school-based therapist. So if you can just kind of talk to people about what that is, just to kind of get a basic understanding of working in the schools and maybe how that's different from working with students or families in the community. And we can start there.
Yeah, so I think I've been working in the West Bend school districts for about 2 years now. I started, I think, midway through last year in the high school. So right now, so I work at Affiliated Clinical Services right here in West Bend, and we also have another office in Hartford. And what's so unique about that is just this partnership within the community on how either we got in contact with the schools, and I graciously was like, yeah, I mean, this is my passion. I love middle school age. I love high schoolers. I'm like, what better way to do that is to really connect with the community and combine our resources. So I think that is such an awesome benefit that we have, whether it's the resources that we have at Affiliated that I can bring to the schools. And then I think also the resources that the school has that, I mean, that I am honored to like add on to my toolbox and just, you know, continuing to share on with other people. So essentially what that looks like for me servicing in the schools, I'm at Silverbrook and Badger on Fridays, and then every Monday I'm at the high school. So essentially 1 day a week for each one of those places. And I think what that really looks like is if there is, I think more, you talked about this continuum of just mental health. I feel that sometimes what happens is the counselors that are on staff that really are trying to manage and really support the students with just some of like, if it's, you know, the referrals from the teachers, like, hey, let's check in with this person. If it becomes more of a persistent thing, often then if, you know, families are interested in looking for more in not intensive care, but I think more inclusive care, whether it's like family sessions and family supports, that's typically how sometimes we get roped some of those cases. But I think what's really good about that is it's really awesome with Sean or just any of the school counselors. They'll like, hey, Amber, do you have room in your schedule? I really feel that this student could really benefit from some more tips and tricks on how to, one, potentially, you know, increase the amount of days that you get to school, or potentially get that clinical diagnosis for that additional accommodation or support that could be helpful in the school environment. So it really varies on the variety of ways that I do support the students. I think the biggest benefit of all is just working together as a community. I mean, I wouldn't have the resources of being able to, you know, connect with teachers and really hear about their perspectives and giving them supports and vice versa. So I just think it's a really awesome opportunity that I have in addition to being in our clinic, so.
So what's unique is more of a team, like a team setting for that too. Let's jump into one of our first questions. And you talked about this a little bit before everyone got here. We started just in how you would support somebody who's maybe having a hard time attending school. And whether it's something you would do or you would, you know, work with the school to do for that family, the parent or the student, just if they're struggling with truancy, like how might you support or push the school to help support the student?
Yeah, it's a really big topic, and unfortunately I do see it be quite a frequent thing. It may not be, it's all at different severity levels. But I think the biggest way that I tend to approach this is, you know, kind of like what both of you kind of voiced, was just this fact of like really listening to the child. Like what is going on? Like what sort of supports do you need? Like, is it, you know, an altered schedule? What can we do? So I think with truancy, a lot of what this kind of happens is it some of these things that go unnoticed for quite some time, and then we have these stacked up days that what's going on, and maybe the student just hasn't spoke up about it yet, or hasn't found it within themselves, and or maybe not be ready to talk about what they're experiencing. So often I have had cases where I have started seeing students because of truancy. My child is struggling to go to school. We don't know what to do. So then it's about me then offering, just that resource of like, okay, let's build that connection with school, see what we can do together as a team. And often that will come in terms of, I have done letters of support to reverse if there is fines, if there is way to, if there is like a specific plan that they can put in place, like, okay, how do we build this attendance, right? Can we shoot for, 3 days a week versus 5 days a week? And just building that tolerance for them to just see that progress and see them succeed, even if it's in those small steps. I say small progress is progress. And that's what I stress heavily, especially for, teens that may be like, well, I only went 1 day. And I'm like, you went 1 day. And it goes for parents as well, just thinking about like, well, I really still would like to see them go every day. And I was like, although we need to recognize like they're on this journey and they're making these small baby steps in progress. So I think all in all, there are different ways that truancy can be just kind of handled and negotiated for sure. I think West Bend School District does a really wonderful job with that particularly. I know the word truancy is a very scary thing because that means it either is the child is responsible for paying fines or it ends up on the families or caregivers' laps, and that isn't fun. So I think it's about just really checking in with the students and trying to just understand how come these occurrences are happening, and building that support plan and how we can get them to attend school more.
So you talked about the attendance and truancy, and that's an important thing. And that was the question. I should have read the other one, or that I'm going to ask now first. But other than attendance, how do you see, in your experience, like anxiety and depression affecting students? Of course, we're looking at the extreme of they're just not able to get to school or school on a regular basis. But what other things do you see?
I think Lydia covered this very well in this cyclical fashion. It's where like it's manageable, but it's there. It's this cycle. I may be able to do it, but then I also got to think about this, or then I think about, something else, and then it just continues to, that cycle to keep going. I think, just supporting anxiety and depression in school, I think it really comes down to, and I know this is going to be repetitive, but really just checking in and being very observant, child by child. Yes, we can make those, comparisons, and we can see similar symptoms amongst students, but I think it's really, really important to really observe and really check in with each individual student that potentially may be struggling with something, whether it's, any sort of condition that they may be experiencing. I don't know if that answered the question, but.
Yeah, you just have to say confidence, right? I think to add on to that, where yes, it's really, sometimes it's difficult to notice who is struggling. Those students are struggling, and Jackie, you can attest to that too. Like in class, like some are just, they prefer to be invisible in that respect. And so when then you can intervene, and that's kind of what you're talking about too. I wanted to ask you, so you talked about earlier working with the team of school staff, whether it's the counselors, maybe the administration, or other teachers or support people there. Can you talk about the family? We have a lot of parents listening, parents here. Just that. How do you work with families, and how important is that to work with them as a team as well?
I take having family involvement very seriously, because essentially I only see the child maybe once every 7 days or once every 14 days. And that really leaves all the other time up to the student and the families to kind of navigate, practice the skills, and essentially do the work. So how I kind of involve that with me being at schools, obviously I'm seeing students at schools, so that is kind of there is the advantage of, one, students aren't missing as much school. You don't have to take children out of classes and miss 2 hours of school. Parents don't have to take PTO to get their child to and from appointments, since they're right here. So I think that's kind of the advantage of making it more accessible for families. I think one thing that I've really put in place and really stressed is how to get creative in how I involve families. The ways that I do this is I require at least it varies, one session at least every 2 months, every 3 months, to be in office for goals updates, often simultaneously with seeing students. I will offer parent sessions and parent supports in office to go over, like, if they're struggling to navigate, like, how do I support my child that is struggling with chronic depression and is isolating themselves? How do you start that conversation? Where do I start? So often that can be a really beneficial thing that I tend to try to make very present in the work, with just working with parents. And then I think more so into the high school, I will say that I do coordinate more with each student that I do work with. How much involvement do you want parents to know about? And kind of like, it's this, I have to really practice gingerly with, like, respecting their autonomy as, developing into adults, but then also still wanting to have the parents involved in some way. So sometimes it does vary into high school on how involved parents can get. But I always say, if parents do have questions, I do keep that dialogue open at all times for them.
So, and like you're saying too, looking at it as a continuum, like early on, early elementary, you're going to have more parent involvement than you would at the high school level, but having that door open, certainly. And I would just like to add to that. So when I have 2 boys, twin boys, and when they've been in counseling since 4th grade. When they were at Badger, they met with a therapist there, and I would pop in sometimes. They didn't always like it because I was there, but just to get those updates and be a part of that. And I really think that to have that parent involvement is crucial. It was for us, but then also just to have that involvement. But parents, you need to be there to continue to advocate and have a say in your your child's treatment. But then also, if things aren't going the right direction, you need to be able to step in and just talk about that as well. Because believe it or not, sometimes the students will say everything's great, and that's not the case, certainly. And what I want to do is talk about a question is, like, how do schools identify students that might need help? And Amber's here representing Affiliated Clinical Services. We have several other agencies. We're fortunate in the West Bend School District to have several agencies that come in and provide school-based counseling. but there can be some barriers with that as well. That alleviates or reduces a lot of the barriers because you can see the students directly in the school, but your schedules fill up, and so then there's waiting lists. And I know that anybody seeking mental health support now, that's just a reality of the situation we're in at this point. But again, like I said, just to go to school-wise, so I'm kind of dual role here, so I'm representing my former career as a school counselor, but just to talk about that a little bit in identifying. And in my current role, in past practice, Jackie mentioned if you had a concern with a student, you would contact the counselor, like email them or go down and talk to them, and that's typically how it would come about if there were any issues. If teachers or any staff members notice things, they would reach out to usually the school counselors first, maybe the school psychologist, and kind of get the ball rolling there. Then the counselors would follow up with the student, depending on the grade or the parents. Parents could also make a direct request, and that hasn't changed at all. So if they have a concern, they can contact typically, again, the school counselor is going to be the point person. So those are the main channels. Karen mentioned this earlier, like we're talking about it a lot more in our school district. What that looks like is we have intentionally built in mental health professional development. All different types of sessions, like just overall how mental health impacts students or student learning. We have a specific session on anxiety and depression and how that impacts students and different strategies or supports for them. We're going to be doing one on supporting students with ADHD and looking at it a little differently, where which is a newer concept for me, from a neurodiversity lens, like just to process it that way. And again, that's going to be coming up for our staff. So we have that. In the past, we've had how trauma impacts students and families, and just knowing that we need to talk about those things. And so that's a bigger awareness that our staff has. We also have a form now a formal, informal form where staff, anybody in the district can fill it out if they have a student concern. And that comes directly to me, and then I would reach out to the family to talk about counseling support or any other support that the family might need. There is the same version for parents to fill out, so if they're like, I don't have time to talk to a counselor, or I just want to fill out this form, like we have that available, and that's going to be on our website. So again, it's trying to streamline that process and speed that up from I have a concern, or I'm not sure if it's something that warrants counseling, but it'll again get that ball rolling to have people start looking into it, or working with the student or the parents directly to put those pieces into place, or at least just do an evaluation, to see where the student's at and if they do need extra support. So once that happens, like in school, again, a continuum. It would be, maybe referring to one of our school-based providers if they have openings, or a community provider. So again, that's going to be an appointment that has to be scheduled outside of the school hours or during school hours, where then students are leaving, just like if you're going to the dentist. But then there's somewhere in the middle where it's just check-ins with the school counselor. Maybe a family liaison, so they're another support person, or the school psychologist. So all three of those individuals in those roles support students with mental health concerns. They may have a trusted teacher that they, really that's their adult at school. And so sometimes we have the teachers that will mentor that student, or just spend that time intentionally with them to be a support, but also to grow that relationship. We focus on, within the buildings, they look a little different, but we have calming centers or corners or rooms, which is a kind of a newer concept where students can take breaks, like shorter term breaks, while they're there. They're doing something, we talk about emotion regulation, and so they're doing what they need to do, practicing some skills or strategies to help calm themselves down so they can return to the classroom. So that's something that's utilized a lot, again, across all buildings, and is very successful. Students may just take breaks, so they have an agreement with their teacher, like, hey, I just need to, when I give you a signal, or if I ask permission, sometimes just like they give the teacher a look and they have that worked out ahead of time, and the teacher knows they just need to go take a walk, and they'll do that and then come back. So we're better at responding to those things in a proactive way, where we don't want it to get to the point where the student is out of control emotionally or behaviorally, to try and prevent that as much as possible from that rising to that level. So Lydia, I'm sure you took breaks at times, like when you're at school, or are at school now, just based on that need. We're doing a better job of, Jackie, I think you talked about listening, or Amber, you did too, like listening to the students and just helping meet them where they're at and give them their needs. Some people are like, well, they shouldn't be skipping class, or why aren't they in school every day? And it's kind of letting go of that past practice or those expectations or those judgments, and knowing that some of you mentioned, or we all probably mentioned at some point, like everyone's different, and we need to approach each student from that lens and seeing what's going to work for them. Because the same thing doesn't work for everybody, just like us as adults. Like what works to calm you down when you're really upset may be different from what I need in that sense. And so again, as a school system, we're better at doing that than we maybe have been in the past. But again, we only know we don't catch everybody, and so it's a matter of relying on sometimes friends, sometimes their classmates or peers will report to the school counselor or a teacher like they have concerns, and then we'll follow up that way. Sometimes we have other parents that will call, like friends of the family maybe, that will call in, and then we'll be able to follow up there as well. So we have structures in place. We're working on, again, just making those more formalized, so that we can respond in a faster manner, especially now knowing that the need is so crucial and so big that we want to get them connected as quickly as possible. So those are some of the things that the school does, at least to identify. And if you feel like your student needs help, please feel free to reach out at any time. You can contact me directly, or like you mentioned, like the school counselor, like that is assigned to that school or assigned to your student, so that we can put some things into place, or at least do a little digging to see what would be most appropriate. Also, we talked a little bit about the 504 plan and some accommodations. We all did at some point. Just wanted to let you know as well, we like to be flexible with student scheduling, knowing that sometimes a full day of school attendance is just not a realistic expectation. And so again, for us to let go of that and to say, can you come for 2 hours? If you can just come into the building and not go to any of your classes, like Amber said, like that's still a success. It's still a step in the right direction. And so just doing that in small increments and building on that. And Lydia, you said earlier, like that motivation, like once you experience success, you're going to have more motivation, more confidence to approach that next obstacle. And so we're trying to build that or those experiences in as much as possible. So if your child just comes to school and they sit in the counseling office or somewhere else, like that's okay, because we want them present, and they can build from there, certainly. And again, we're talking about that attendance, but just know that the biggest message I want you to leave with is schools will respond once we know, and we'll work with parents, work with families. Luckily, that was Karen's experience, as a parent, but just to be able to do that. And we have a lot of good people that can follow up and provide that support. So we just need to get better at asking for that help across the board as well. So Lydia, I have a question. I want to come back to you a little bit. You talked about early on you didn't want to be different, and so you didn't want to ask for help, or whether you didn't say this, having a label or not, like some people are afraid of that. But now as a high school senior, it doesn't sound like that's a concern for you. Can you talk about like maybe what that change was?
Yeah, so like when I was younger, you didn't hear about anxiety, you didn't hear about depression, you just didn't talk about it. So like when I got the diagnosis, I was in denial for a bit. I didn't want to have a label. I didn't want to be different. I didn't want to tell people. I didn't want to get looked at differently. I didn't want to get judged. But now it's kind of like we don't talk about it enough, and kids don't understand it like to the degree that they should. They make jokes about it, they laugh about it, they think it's something funny, when in reality it's not, like, there's so much you need to know about it, and I think that, honestly, people need to talk about it more and normalize it, and that you're not different because you have a label.
Thank you. I don't know that I could have said that any better. And what I really appreciate there in your response is that to normalize it, but for everyone to be able to understand, like, it's a real thing, and it needs to be taken seriously, but also that there's help out there for people as well. Yeah. So one of the things that our time's closing down here, and I want to just go down the line. And Karen, I may start with you. And I want you to answer the question of what's one thing you wish you knew at any point in your journey. What's one thing you wish you knew? And you're all going to answer this one. So yeah.
The one thing I wish I knew, I wish I knew how much my daughter was struggling. I wish I could have seen the warning signs. I wish I would have understood depression and anxiety more.
Thank you. Lydia, how about you? What's one thing you wish you knew?
One thing I wish I knew was how to cope with my anxiety, was just how to get through a panic attack without it spiraling, where I was like hyperventilating. I just wish I knew how to cope with it.
Okay. Jackie?
I wish I knew more sooner to help more kids through the whole course of my career. And again, we're learning more as we go, so the more you know, the better you do. So that's what I wish.
Amber, how about for you?
I wish I would have known potentially some of the skills in my younger years in supporting potentially some of the struggles I went through. And I just feel really honored that I can make sure that that's not a thing that happens in other people's journeys, and I can support and give them the tools they need.
So there are things now that you're passing along that you could have benefited from at that age, yeah. But like you said, what an honor to be in that position to be able to do that. And Karen, you didn't mention this, but I'll speak a little bit about my experience. So I mentioned both of our sons were in counseling, and he may get mad at me for saying this, but one of our boys was more recently diagnosed on the autism spectrum, and for me as a parent, we struggled with counseling not working for many years. He was on medication for ADHD. He was on medication for a mood disorder to try and modulate. He was a really angry child and would hold it together in school, but at home, it would be pretty chaotic a lot of times. And and we were on that journey and in trying different things that really didn't work. And then finally doing a full neuropsychological evaluation and to rule out autism, and he meets those criteria, a lot of those characteristics. And for us, then it was like, oh, I wish I would have known that earlier, because it would have helped save a lot of struggles that we had. I don't want to say damage, but a lot of our fights or power struggles, would have been prevented, because as a parent, I would have known to respond differently. And I guess, like, in sharing that, and Karen, you didn't mention this, but is there some guilt that goes along with that, like not knowing earlier? And then how have you worked through that or let go of that, or is that something you still carry around?
It's a really good question. Yes, I have a ton of guilt. I feel at times that I let her down. I'm going to try not to cry. But I have said in presentations and to Lydia, I did the best I could with what I had at the time. And I'm continuing to learn. Lydia teaches me something new every day. I think it makes me a better mom, a better educator. But the guilt, yeah, it is something I struggle with. And at the end of the day, I look at her and I know I did the right thing, as hard as it was, and I made mistakes along the way. I think part of being a parent Part of being a teacher is being able to say, you know what, I don't know, I don't have the answer, but let me get it for you. Being vulnerable enough to say, you know what, I don't know, and it's okay. So yeah, that's something that I'm working through. But overall, I couldn't be more proud of my daughter. She amazes me every day with her strength and ability to overcome really difficult things.
Thank you, Karen. I appreciate that honesty, and I blindsided you with it. I didn't mean to, but it just kind of like in hearing that, in listening to you, I kind of wondered if that was part of it. I really loved two things that you said there. One is you did the best you could at the time, and I think that's a message for all the parents to know and take away from it is. Sometimes that's all you can do, and you can feel like you're failing or really struggling, and that may be true. And like Lydia said, you're stuck in a cycle yourself, but you're doing the best that you can. So to be able to let go of some of that guilt or that blame. And another thing I've heard and I felt ourselves, like my wife and I talked a lot about, like, what did we do wrong? You know, like, did we do something to bring this on? And the answer to that is no. It just happens, and you can have the quote unquote perfect family and still have a mental health challenge like coming up. So we spent a lot of time looking for a cause or something to point a finger at, because then, you know, when we can do that, then hopefully we can treat it or figure it out. And that's just what we were never really able to land on anything, and we had to give up that search. But just to feel that guilt as well, and to know, like, all right, I made some mistakes, and we're all going to do that, but we have to give ourselves grace and forgive those, because it's there, and that's just a part of life. But the third thing that I liked you saying is, you know, you're moving on from it, you're learning from it. It's made you stronger, it's made Lydia stronger, but then to see now all those little celebrations you get to share with Lydia, and as she's continuing her journey moving forward in that positive direction. So does anybody in the audience have a quick question for the panel? No. All right. So just close things down then. And I want to thank you guys all for participating. Any last things anybody wants to say? You're burning to say? No. Okay. I think you did a great job, but thank you for being a part of this and helping that move forward. We're going to have we have two more scheduled. In February, we're going to talk about parenting strategies, so more specific strategies from professionals. We're hoping to have another family share their experience and story, but that's going to be the focus. And then in March, we're going to have one that's going to focus on coping, again, specific coping strategies, but then also building hope and resilience, and how important those are in your journey or your recovery, and also just living through it, you know, because it's something that's going to be there for a long time for many people, but to build those in there. So we're going to have another panel of experts for those two sessions as well. And I just want to thank everyone who came tonight or joined virtually. And again, I mentioned this to who might be watching it later. If you ever have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. And like Karen said, if I don't know the answer, I'll find it, because I don't know a lot of the answers either, but am willing to do that work because it's an important work to do. And I want to thank the Westman School District for allowing us to do this. Superintendent Wimmer has been very supportive of these sessions, and I appreciate that as well. And then specific people, Joy Bueller's in the room over there. She's running our camera, so just making sure that it's streaming live and being recorded. So I really appreciate her and helping with that. And then Steve Huffman, he was our speaker last month, and is continuing to help plan these and just be very supportive. So I appreciate that as well. So